The courtroom cameras recorded the exact moment Brandon Matthews made the biggest mistake of his privileged life. He sat slumped in the defendant's chair as if he were waiting for a drink at Starbucks, his $1,200 iPhone casually resting on the table, his designer sneakers likely worth more than the elderly man's entire monthly Social Security check. His expression carried the unmistakable look of someone who had never, in his 18 years of life, faced real consequences. He had no idea that in a matter of minutes, that same phone and the private jokes he had texted to his friends would become the weapon Judge Judy used to tear his arrogance apart on national television. What makes the situation so unbelievable isn't just that Brandon lost. It isn't just that he was humiliated in front of millions. What Judge Judy did to this spoiled kid was so sharp, so devastatingly thorough, that the moment became the most viral courtroom clip of the year. This was a teenager who walked into the courtroom, planning to mock an elderly accident victim on TV for content, for laughs, for the sake of his weak social media following. He had posted about it. He had bragged about it. He had assured his friends it would be easy money and easy publicity. Brandon Matthews believed he was about to become internet famous for outsmarting America's toughest judge. Instead, he became the perfect example of why you never underestimate someone who has spent 25 years dismantling people just like him. Picture the scene. Brandon Mitchell, 18 years old, trust fund kid from Westchester County, walking into Judge Judy's courtroom in an $800 Supreme hoodie and limited edition Jordan shoes he either waited hours for or paid someone else to wait for. His confidence wasn't just high. It was off the charts. He had spent 3 weeks building what he believed was a flawless case, Googling legal terms, watching YouTube videos on how to win in court, practicing his victim face in the mirror. He looked at Judge Judy as if she were just another authority figure he could bend to his will, another adult who would fold under his lawyer father's influence and his family's money. He had no idea he was walking straight into a trap that had been set from the moment his file reached Judge Judy's desk. On the surface, the case looked simple, just a fender bender, another insurance disagreement, the kind of dispute handled in small claims court every day. Brandon had crashed his BMW into an elderly man's parked Honda, and somehow, using the kind of twisted reasoning only extreme privilege can produce, he was suing the victim. Let that sink in. This teenager had totaled a 73-year-old, retired postal workers only car, left the scene without leaving any information, and then had the audacity to take that same man to court claiming emotional distress, what neither the audience nor Brandon realized, or what he had somehow convinced himself to ignore, was that Judge Judy's research team had already obtained his phone records. Every text message, every Instagram story, every TikTok clip, every digital trace, proving he wasn't just wrong, but lying, manipulative, and treating the elderly as a joke. Robert Chen sat in the plaintiff's chair, holding a worn folder filled with repair estimates and medical bills, his hands trembling slightly. At 73, this retired postal worker had spent his entire life following rules, respecting authority, and taking care of his family. The 15-year-old Honda Civic wasn't worth much, but it was fully paid off, carefully maintained, and it mattered. More importantly, it was Robert's lifeline. His wife was undergoing chemotherapy for cancer, and that car was how he drove her to treatments, picked up her medications, and held on to a small sense of independence and dignity. During their retirement years, when Brandon's BMW slammed into the parked Civic, something security cameras later showed happened at nearly 60 miles per hour in a 25 miles per hour zonette, wasn't just property damage. It was the destruction of their mobility, their independence, and their peace of mind. And now Robert had to sit across from the teenager, responsible, and listen to him pretend he was the one who had been wronged. Brandon thought the whole thing would be effortless. He had told his friends, posted online, even filmed TikTok videos about his upcoming court date. To him, this wasn't about responsibility or just to sit was content. It was his opportunity to show his 12,000 followers how to game the system, how to use confidence and money to win even. When he was clearly at fault, he had boasted that Judge Judy was nothing more than a TV personality, not a real judge. He insisted the worst outcome would be a minor payout his father would cover without a second thought. His lawyer father had apparently told him that TV court shows were harmless, that nothing real could touch him, that it was all for ratings. Brandon believed all of it. He had never been more wrong in his entire privilege-filled, consequence-free life. Before watching this entitled teen's world collapse, the narrator urges the audience to subscribe because what's coming next is presented as justice in its purest form. Proof that karma not only exists but has flawless timing and a sharp sense of humor. This isn't just another courtroom dispute. It's a lesson in why your digital footprint matters. Why disrespecting people who actually earn their authority is a terrible mistake. And why believing you're untouchable makes you the easiest target. The 8 minutes that ruined Brandon Matthews are about to unfold. And every second is more satisfying than the last. Judge Judy had seen thousands of cases throughout her long career. But within the first half-minute of reviewing Brandon's file, every one of her instincts lit up. The inconsistencies in his account weren't minor, they were massive. Blatant contradictions that came from someone so used to lying he no longer bothered to keep his story straight, an 18-year-old claiming emotional distress from an accident he caused. Insurance companies on both sides refusing to process claims because the statements didn't align with the evidence. Security footage allegedly showing one thing, while the police reports described something entirely different. Then there were the social media posts deleted in a hurry, yet never truly erased. Brandon had forgotten that the internet never forgets. Judge Judy's team had saved screenshots of everything, and they had spent the previous evening assembling a precise timeline that would dismantle each claim the privileged teenager planned to make. The courtroom buzzed with its usual energy as cameras rolled and the audience settled in, expecting a straightforward case that would be wrapped up in minutes with Judge Judy's trademark efficiency. Production assistants finished their sound checks. The bailiff took his place at the door. No one in the room, except perhaps Judge Judy herself, knew they were about to witness a level of courtroom destruction that would be replayed and dissected for years. Brandon strutted through the double doors, as if entering his high school cafeteria, where everyone knew his name and his family's wealth bought him the respect he never earned. His $1,000 sneakers squeaked on the polished floor. His designer hoodie hung perfectly, styled to look casually effortless despite clearly being curated. He glanced at the cameras with confidence, already imagining the clips he'd post later, complete with captions bragging about how he handled business like a boss. Behind him sat his parents, trying to maintain dignity while visibly uneasy with their son's attitude. His father, a corporate lawyer who had spent Brandon's entire childhood teaching him that rules applied only to other people, shifted uncomfortably. His mother clutched her designer handbag, avoiding eye contact with everyone. They were the ones who had enabled him, financed his lifestyle, cleaned up his mistakes, and convinced themselves that shielding him from consequences was good parenting. Today, they would finally see what that approach had produced. Robert Chen sat quietly in the plaintiff's section, small and fragile beside Brandon's wealth and swagger. His suit was outdated but clean, likely the same one he wore to his retirement party. His hands shook slightly as he organized his paperwork, photos of his destroyed Honda, schedules for his wife's medical appointments, repair estimates that exceeded the car's value. He looked like a man who had already accepted defeat. Someone who had lived long enough to know that people with money usually win, even when they're wrong. Judge Judy entered with her usual brisk authority, and the room rose in respect. Everyone except Brandon. He waited 2 extra seconds, deliberately taking his time as he slowly stood, sneaking one last look at his phone. It was a small gesture, barely noticeable, but Judge Judy noticed everything. Her eyes narrowed just slightly, a look regular viewers recognized as the quiet moment before a storm. She opened the case file, already familiar with every detail, but allowed the silence to stretch to heighten the tension. Brandon misinterpreted it completely. He believed she was uncertain, still trying to decipher his brilliant defense. He had no idea she was simply choosing the most effective way to dismantle him for maximum educational impact. The opening statements began. Robert Chen spoke in a trembling, gentle voice, describing the accident simply and honestly. Without exaggeration, he explained that he had been inside the grocery store picking up specific foods for his wife's chemotherapy diet when he heard the crash. By the time he rushed outside, the BMW was already speeding away. His car, his beloved Honda that he had cared for meticulously for 15 years, was completely destroyed. The front end was crushed, the frame was bent, and the mechanic had taken one look before declaring it a total loss. Robert's voice wavered slightly as he explained that without a vehicle, getting his wife to her cancer treatments now meant relying on neighbors, charity, and the kindness of strangers. For a man who had spent his entire life being independent, this new dependence was almost as painful as the financial damage. Brandon barely glanced at Robert during this testimony. Instead, he flipped through his notes, reviewing a prepared statement filled with legal terms he had copied from internet forums. When Judge Judy invited him to present his account, he stood with exaggerated confidence and launched into what he clearly believed was a devastating counterargument. He insisted that Robert's car had been parked illegally, sticking out into the street and creating a hazard for drivers. He claimed the emotional shock from the accident, the damage to his expensive BMW, and the pressure of being falsely accused had caused him severe psychological distress. He tossed around phrases like contributory negligence and assumption of risk with the certainty of someone who had spent maybe 20 minutes browsing a legal website. His voice carried that unmistakable note of condescension, belonging to someone who has never been told no, never been challenged, and never encountered someone smarter than him. Judge Judy listened with the patience of a chess master watching an amateur play predictable moves. She allowed him to talk, to dig himself deeper, and to commit fully to his fabricated version of events. Every few sentences, she slipped in a seemingly harmless question, each one a strategic setup for what was coming. Where exactly were you driving from? What time did this occur? Did you stop to check on the other vehicle? Did you leave any information? Brandon answered each question with growing confidence, clearly convinced he was instructing this TV judge on how the real world worked. His responses were smooth, rehearsed almost entirely false. Then came the moment everything shifted. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly, her neutral expression sharpening into something far more dangerous, and asked the question that marked the beginning of Brandon's downfall. Mr. Matthews, do you frequently text while driving? Brandon barely paused. He shrugged with the nonchalance of someone discussing his weekend plans. Sometimes, Your Honor. I mean, everyone does it. It's not a big deal if you're careful. A subtle hush fell over the room, the instinctive silence people share when they sense something major is about to happen. Judge Judy's eyebrows lifted just a fraction. A tiny shift that longtime viewers knew signaled incoming disaster for someone. And do you text about your accidents, Mr. Matthews? Do you share the details of your vehicular incidents with your friends? Brandon's confident expression faltered for a split second, confusion crossing his face. I don't understand what you're asking, Your Honor. What does that have to do with anything? Judge Judy reached down beside her bench and lifted a thick manila folder, one that clearly contained extensive documentation and meticulous research. The movement was deliberate, almost theatrical, and Brandon's eyes followed the folder with the first real flicker of concern crossing his previously smug expression. Mr. Matthews, Judge Judy began, when you filed this lawsuit, you opened yourself up to discovery. My team subpoenaed your phone records, your text messages, your social media posts, everything you believed was private between you and your friends. The color drained from Brandon's face as the reality of her words pushed through his wall of arrogance. He glanced at his parents. Their expressions had shifted from uneasy to horrified. His father, the lawyer, who should have anticipated this, looked as if he wished he could disappear into the floor. Your Honor, that's an invasion of privacy. You can't just go through someone's personal phone. Brandon's voice rose in pitch, losing its earlier confidence and taking on the whiny tone of a child. Upset about a confiscated toy, Judge Judy's response was cold and devastating. Mr. Matthews, you committed fraud, fled the scene of an accident, and then sued your victim. Your privacy concerns stopped mattering the moment you chose to lie under oath in my courtroom. And I'm about to show you and everyone watching exactly what kind of person you really are. She opened the folder slowly, deliberately, and the audience leaned forward as one, sensing an explosion approaching. Brandon's lawyer, an inexperienced associate his father had sent along to supervise what was supposed to be an easy win, frantically shuffled through his own papers, clearly unprepared for the sudden shift. Robert Chen, who moments earlier had seemed resigned to defeat, lifted his head, a faint spark of hope appearing in his tired eyes. Judge Judy pulled out the first printed text message, enlarged so the cameras in courtroom could see it clearly. This text, she said, was sent from your phone at 3:47 p.m. on the day of the accident, approximately 10 minutes before you crashed into Mr. Chun's vehicle. It was sent to your friend Tyler Morrison. I'll read it for the court. She held it up, about to see how fast this BMW can go on Maple Street. She paused, letting the words hang heavy in the air. Maple Street, Mr. Matthews, is the exact street where you struck Mr. Chun's parked Honda at a speed that security cameras recorded as 58 miles per hour in a 25 mile per zone. Brandon's mouth opened and closed uselessly, his rehearsed excuses dissolving under the weight of his own words. That was a joke. Your Honor, I wasn't being serious. I was just messing around with my friend. All the bravado had vanished from his voice, replaced by a desperate edge as he watched his carefully constructed lies crumble in real time. But Judge Judy wasn't finished, not remotely. She lifted the second text, even more damaging than the first. This message was sent 30 seconds after the accident. Same recipient. Judge Judy continued. LMAO just smashed into some old dude's car. It's total ha-ha. The courtroom erupted with gasps and murmurs of disbelief. People who had been quietly observing only moments before were now visibly angry, their expressions shifting to outright disgust, the kind reserved for the most heartless behavior. Robert Chen gripped the sides of his chair, his eyes filling with tears as he listened to the casual cruelty this teenager had used to describe destroying the vehicle that held his entire livelihood together. Brandon shook his head frantically, hands raised as if he could somehow stop the words from existing. That's out of context. You don't understand. I was in shock. People say stupid things when they're in shock. But even he seemed to realize how weak the excuses sounded. Nothing could explain the gleeful tone of the messages. Then came the third text, the one that shifted the case from a simple accident dispute into something far darker. Judge Judy's voice sharpened with real anger as she read it. 2 minutes after the crash, while Mr. Chen was outside in the grocery store parking lot, looking at his destroyed car. You sent this message, didn't leave a note. Old man was still in the store, lol. Let his insurance deal with it. The reaction was immediate and visceral. Someone in the audience blurted, "Oh my God," before quickly covering their mouth. Others shook their heads in disbelief. The bailiff even stepped forward to calm the rising noise. This was no longer mere negligence. This was deliberate, calculated wrongdoing documented in the perpetrator's own words. Brandon's face had gone from pale to utterly colorless. All the swagger, all the confidence had drained away, replaced by the terrifying realization that he had created a permanent written record of his own crimes. Judge Judy showed no intention of softening the blow, and no one in the room wanted her to. You fled the scene of an accident. Mr. Matthews, you laughed about destroying an elderly man's car. You deliberately avoided taking responsibility, and you documented every bit of it in writing. Each sentence hit like a hammer, driving home the severity of his actions. But Judge Judy was nowhere near finished. What she revealed next proved that Brandon's cruelty and entitlement went far beyond a hit and run. She lifted another printed message. This one sent the day after the crash, the name of the recipient made. Brandon's father visibly flinch. This message was sent to your father. Mr. Matthews, the same father sitting behind you right now. The lawyer who should have taught you about ethics and accountability. Let me read what you wrote. She held the page up. Dad crashed the car. Old Honda looks cheap. Can you call insurance and say he hit me? He probably won't even fight it. The implications were staggering, and the courtroom fell into stunned silence as people absorbed what they had just heard. This wasn't a teenager making impulsive mistakes. This was intentional fraud, premeditated, calculated down. The message directly implicated his father in the scheme. Brandon's lawyer shot to his feet, panic written across his face, trying to blurt out some kind of objection. Judge Judy shut him down instantly with a single raised hand and a look sharp enough to freeze molten rock. Brandon shook his head violently, his voice climbing into a near scream as desperation began to take over. I was panicking. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't thinking clearly. My dad didn't even respond to that text. But the excuses only dug him deeper, because Judge Judy was already prepared for that argument. Actually, Mr. Matthews, she said, her voice icy. Your father did respond. He texted back. Let me make some calls, she continued, and then, quite conveniently, your insurance company received a claim stating that Mr. Chen's vehicle backed into yours while you were legally parked, to claim that security footage proves was completely fabricated. Brandon's father abruptly stood up, his face flushed red, and walked out of the courtroom without a single word. He couldn't bear the exposure of his own involvement in the deception. His mother stayed behind, silently crying into her hands as the painful truth settled in. She was finally seeing the damage caused by years of excuses, protection, and choosing comfort over consequences. Judge Judy lifted the fifth text message. And somehow it was even worse because it revealed premeditation and open mockery of the legal system. This message, she said, was sent 1 week ago to a group chat with 5 of your friends. I'll read it exactly as written. Court with Judge Judy today. Going to make this old man look stupid on TV. Easy win, easy money. Might go viral, lol. The audience erupted. Several people shouted their outrage before the bailiff stepped forward to restore order. Brandon had walked into this courtroom, intending to humiliate Robert Chen on national television. He planned to turn an elderly man's suffering into entertainment. He wanted to use Judge Judy's courtroom as a stage to mock someone who had done absolutely nothing to him. The callousness, the deliberate cruelty, the total lack of empathy revealed someone who viewed other people as nothing more than props for his own personal reality show. By now, Brandon had completely fallen apart. His carefully groomed hair was a mess from running his trembling hands through it over and over. His designer clothes now looked like a costume that no longer fit the role he had been trying to play. His voice broke into ragged gasps as he made one last, desperate attempt to defend himself. "Your Honor, please. Those texts don't mean anything. I was just talking trash with my friends. Everyone says stuff they don't mean. A teen. I made mistakes. You can't use private conversations against me like this." But Judge Judy's face showed zero sympathy, only the calm, cold satisfaction of someone who had built a flawless case piece by piece and was now watching it collapse on the exact person who deserved it. "Mr. Matthews," she said, "these aren't private conversations. These are confessions. They are evidence of fraud, conspiracy, hit and run, and a complete lack of human decency. You didn't make mistakes. You made choices. And now you will face the consequences of those choices." But she wasn't done. She had been saving the most devastating piece of evidence, the one that would obliterate any remaining shred of defense. Brandon believed he had. She lifted one final printed text message. This one had been sent just yesterday, less than 24 hours before everyone entered the courtroom. "This message," she said, "was sent to your mother." She read it aloud. "Don't worry, Mom. I've got this. Judge is just a TV personality. She can't do anything real. Dad's lawyer said, worst case, we settle for like $2,000. That's nothing, Judge." Judy looked up and fixed Brandon with a stare so intense he physically recoiled. "Would you like to revise your assessment of what I can do, Mr. Matthews? Because I'm about to show you exactly how real my authority is and exactly how significant $2,000 is compared to what you're about to pay." But the revelation didn't end with the text messages. Judge Judy's team had done far more than Brandon's privileged mind could have imagined. She lifted a stack of printed screenshots from his social media posts he thought he'd erased, not realizing screenshots live forever, and deleted content can always be recovered. "Your Instagram story from the day of the accident," she said, holding the printout. "Posted at 4:15 p.m., deleted 3 hours later." The photo showed his damaged BMW, with a caption, "Crazy day lol," and a smiling selfie like he'd just had an exciting adventure instead of committing a crime. Another screenshot appeared. "Your TikTok video from that evening. Deleted the next morning, likely after your father instructed you to scrub your accounts." The caption read, "When you total someone's car, but you're rich, so it doesn't matter," including a clip of you literally dancing in front of your damaged vehicle. Each piece of evidence was another nail in the coffin of Brandon's defense, another example of his chilling lack of empathy, another reminder that this wasn't a decent kid who made a single mistake, but someone raised to believe that money and privilege excused him from basic morality. Brandon was openly sobbing now, his face buried in his hands, shoulders shaking. Whether the tears were genuine remorse or simply the shock of finally encountering consequences money couldn't erase was impossible to tell. For the first time in his life, reality was hitting him with full force. His lawyer had completely given up trying to defend him. He sat motionless, likely already crafting the resignation letter he'd send to Brandon's father once this humiliation was over. Robert Chen watched quietly as Brandon unraveled, tears streaming down his own weathered face, but his were tears of relief and long-awaited vindication. After months of being made to feel unreasonable for expecting basic accountability, he was finally seeing justice. Judge Judy let the enormity of the evidence linger in the room, allowing the silence to thicken. Then she delivered her ruling. Her voice held the weight of someone who had presided over more than 20,000 cases and witnessed every kind of human failing. Yet this one had clearly struck a personal chord. "Mr. Matthews," she began, "in 25 years of jurisprudence, I have seen liars, cheats, and criminals of every variety walk through my courtroom. But you represent something particularly toxic in our society. You represent what happens when privilege meets cruelty, when enablement fuels entitlement, when parents choose comfort over character." She continued, each sentence heavier than the last. "You didn't just commit a crime. You celebrated it. You documented it. You planned to profit from it. And worst of all, you showed absolutely no remorse for the pain you inflicted on an innocent, elderly man whose only offense was parking his car on a public street." Her words struck with the force of a legal sledgehammer. Brandon could do nothing but sit there, absorbing every blow, his former arrogance now appearing like the persona of a completely different person. Then came the financial judgment, far more severe than anything Brandon had imagined possible. "I am ruling in favor of the plaintiff, Mr. Robert Chen, in the amount of $15,000. This includes the full replacement value of his destroyed vehicle, compensation for 3 months of alternative transportation, reimbursement for the medical appointments his wife missed due to the loss of transportation, and punitive damages for the emotional distress caused by your harassment through this frivolous lawsuit. You will also pay all court costs and Mr. Chen's legal fees." Brandon's face went even paler as the reality hit him. $15,000. Not the $2,000 nuisance settlement his father had promised would be the worst-case scenario. Not a symbolic fine or a slap on the wrist. This was real money consequences that even a trust fund kid would feel. But Judge Judy wasn't finished. "In addition," she continued, "these funds must be paid within 30 days. If you fail to pay, I will personally ensure that collection proceedings begin immediately, including potential garnishment of your trust fund." The financial blow alone was devastating, but the legal consequences were far worse, because they wouldn't disappear after a check was written. Judge Judy's voice hardened. "I am forwarding all of these text messages, social media posts, and evidence of conspiracy to the district attorney's office. You have confessed in writing to multiple crimes, including hit and run, insurance fraud, filing a false police report, and conspiracy to commit fraud. These are not civil matters, Mr. Matthews. These are criminal offenses that carry potential jail time, probation, and a permanent record that will follow you for the rest of your life." Brandon's lawyer finally spoke, his hands trembling as he tried to salvage something from the wreckage. "Your Honor, my client is only 18 years old. Surely we can take into account that he's young and made poor decisions without destroying his entire future." Judge Judy shut him down instantly with a statement that would be quoted for years. "Counselor, your client is old enough to drive a car at deadly speeds, old enough to commit premeditated fraud, and old enough to mock an elderly cancer patient for entertainment. He is old enough to face adult consequences." Then, in a rare shift, Judge Judy turned to Robert Chen with genuine compassion, softening her voice. "Mr. Chen, I want to apologize to you on behalf of a justice system that allowed this to continue as long as it did. Your dignity throughout this ordeal has been extraordinary. You came seeking only what was fair, only what you were owed. And instead, you were subjected to additional harassment and cruelty. I hope this judgment brings you some measure of justice and restores your faith that accountability still exists." Robert nodded, unable to speak through his tears. But his expression showed the profound relief of a man finally freed from months of burden. The audience broke into spontaneous applause. Judge Judy allowed it for a few seconds before striking her gavel with a sharp crack that echoed through the room. Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $15,000. Case dismissed. Mr. Matthews, I suggest you use this experience to become a better person, though, frankly. I'm not optimistic about your chances. The aftermath was swift, brutal, and entirely deserved. Within hours of the episode airing, the footage exploded across every major social media platform: Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. Reddit. Every corner of the internet was flooded with clips of Brandon's texts being read aloud, his unraveling, his total destruction at the hands of Judge Judy. Hashtags began trending almost instantly. Hashtag justice served, hashtag texts destroyed him, hash entitled brat gets owned, hashtag Judge Judy wins within 48 hours. The video had amassed more than 50 million views, becoming one of the most viral courtroom clips in TV history. Brandon's once prized social media presence, his carefully curated accounts, and the 12,000 followers he bragged about disappeared overnight as he scrambled to delete or privatize everything. But it didn't matter. The internet had already captured it all: screenshots of his posts, copies of his videos, archives of every smug, incriminating moment. His digital footprint was permanent now, and it would haunt him forever. The legal fallout hit even faster than anyone expected. Under intense public pressure fueled by the viral video and armed with an airtight mountain of evidence taken directly from Brandon's own messages, the district attorney filed criminal charges within 72 hours. Insurance fraud, a felony carrying up to 5 years in prison. Hit and run, a misdemeanor with a mandatory license suspension. Filing a false police report, another misdemeanor. Suddenly, Brandon was facing far more than financial consequences. He was staring down the possibility of jail time, probation, community service, and a criminal record that would shadow every job application, every college admission, every background check for the rest of his life. And his father, whose own text reply had implicated him in the scheme, found himself under investigation by the State Bar Association, facing potential disbarment.